Let's talk my thoughts over the first demo. I didn't pick up the demo until at least 3-4 hours until after it came out, which I was actually kind of grateful that I delayed that amount of time, because even after I tried to get in, I still couldn't get in for another hour, and I just waited until the Twitter feed said some of the problems had been resolved. It took until almost evening for me to get in, and boy, I expected those issues. Just going to be blunt and upfront, I really did expect those issues. I'm not going to talk bugs until near the end of the video, however, so stay tuned for my thoughts on how that part of the demo went. First up, I would like to talk the actual zones that you got to explore. It was beautiful. I kept wanting to go further out than you were allowed. I mean, they did, for the free play, give us quite a bit of space to explore, which was nice, and I enjoyed exploring all of it, though sometimes I would log into the free play and there would be no events. Yeah, that was a little disappointing, but it still was fun to explore and look around for the codex entries, go into the water, and learn that you have a line where your heatsink is that says, oh no, you're going to suffocate if you don't come out of the water if that line goes away. I actually did at one point have to revive somebody in the water during a stronghold. That was funny. The scenery was beautiful throughout both the stronghold, the open world, and the missions. The missions actually shared quite a bit of the scenery that you saw within the open world itself, which was pleasant to see because it just meant that the missions take place kind of in the open world, much like they do in just about any of the Bioware games I've ever played. It was also nice that the fact that they brought back the exploration aspect from Dragon Age Inquisition and Mass Effect Andromeda into Anthem. I'm hoping that events spawn more frequently and not always in the same locations when the game goes live, because it would make it so that you can explore other parts of the world and make it feel more alive than Inquisition had within its world, because in all honesty, once you defeat everything in the hinterlands, there's really no point to return to the hinterlands unless you really, really need the supplies that you can get there. The stronghold. I was thrilled that we got to see the same stronghold that was first shown to us a very long time ago during a Colossus gameplay. It had changed, which I was grateful to see as well, and it's no longer called Scars and Villainy. I actually wasn't paying attention, but I know it's not called Scars and Villainy anymore. I'm actually going to come out with a full guide over the stronghold. I have entire footage that did not have me crash once through it. Now the missions. The one thing I was the most disappointed about the missions was the fact that you couldn't solo them. Every single time I entered them, especially when I was doing the story itself, I was always with a group. The first time through all of it, I kept coming into the middle of the missions, which meant I kept getting half the story cut off. And it wasn't until I had replayed them 6 or 7 times that I finally got the full story of each one of the areas. I'm really hoping that the solo mode does work come launch day, because while I enjoy playing the game with other people, the missions I kind of want to see the entire story of. There is story to it. There are people talking to you over the radio, and if you miss part of that, then you miss part of the story. And I really don't want to miss that part of the story. There's also the fact that the first time through, I would rather have been able to figure out the puzzle on my own. Not that I could have figured it out on my own, because I ended up having a green screen during that, meaning everything was turned green because I hadn't disabled my SLI yet. Later on, when I did learn what the puzzle was and I could see it, I was getting really aggravated at first, because every single time I would do it, someone else would walk over to the other one and mess up the puzzle, so I ended up spending 10 minutes trying to redo what they were doing until finally I managed to get the puzzle solved and we could move forward. Now, I understand where that's coming from. I was like one of those guys where I just pressed the button when I was first in too, because I didn't understand what was going on. The pattern for that puzzle is red as you're facing away from the artifact, right, then purple across from the artifact, and green or gold, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between the two, on the left of the artifact. I don't know if it's going to stay the same for that. The hints for the puzzle is on the red one, it's going to be on the wall to the left as you're facing the puzzle. It's going to be underneath the bridge for the purple one, and I could not find where the green one was. I actually had to experiment until I figured it out that it was the green one. I was actually in an instance for once solo, and that allowed me to figure it out. Javelin gameplay. I really enjoyed the different feeling of each javelin. They did feel different, which was very nice to see. I was able to play the sniper build I really wanted to try out on the Ranger, and I was very grateful that the Ranger was automatically unlocked for us, because it was one of the two I desperately wanted to try out for the demo. The second one I unlocked was the Interceptor. I kept falling into a bad habit with the Interceptor where I was forgetting my other abilities existed, and thus was only using the melee attack, which ended up in a 2-man stronghold, getting me locked in this one section where the guy couldn't res me. Towards the end of the demo, I started leaning more and more towards the Ranger over the Interceptor, despite the fact I believed going into the game the Interceptor would be the Javelin that I'd be maining throughout the start of the game. And right now it's looking like the Ranger. During the last 5 hours of the demo, they let us unlock the other 2 Javelins. I was thrilled about this and jumped right away into the Storm. My first experience on the Storm was crashing into walls continually because it felt so much different from the Ranger, which I had gotten so used to. And then during the first stronghold that I did on my Storm, or the second one, it was a team of all Storms. There were 3 of us. We were all Storms. Everyone left because after the 3rd wipe, I think we all decided not worth it. Totally not worth it. Given they only gave us the last 2 for a set amount of time, I only actually tried out the Storm. I didn't have time to try out the Colossus for this demo weekend, so next weekend, given the fact we have all of our stuff saved over, I will be trying out the Colossus for a little while, but I have a feeling my initial thoughts on the Colossus will remain the same, and it will not be the class for me. This is a BioWare game, which means the story is a major part of it. I wasn't expecting anything really, really great going into the demo. It is a demo. We are being tossed right into the smack dab center of it, and you could actually tell it was. They were walling off certain conversations, possibly because of spoilers, which I completely understand why that was happening. I do not blame them. I would rather wait and play the game entirely from start to finish. But the conversations that they did allow you to have outside of the mission were wonderful to see. The one that stood out the most for me has to be the 2 that had your decisions really impact on them. One was Lucky, the guy who does all your paperwork, and you got to pick one of his missions that his teammates went on. I'm kind of interested to see what would have happened with the other mission, because I picked the one where he went and killed the monsters. I expected something to happen great after having talked with the bartender the first time and having my decision that he uses his acting skills to say no actually have an impact on what happened in his life. Once more on that guy, the bartender's story was by far the most fascinating. It was basically, you went up to him the first time and he was asking your advice on how to say no to a woman who's already married, and you tell him to use his acting skills. He does that, you come back, and he says, well, there's this really cute girl that I'm kind of into, but she wants me to take a package for her. And I said, don't take the package because you don't know what's in it. And if she refuses to tell you, then don't worry about it, because the way he described her, she was really shady. And it's just like, if she's really shady, don't trust her. I advised him not to take the package, and that turned out, spoiler warning, to have a murder at the end of it. Luckily the bartender didn't die, but he's harboring the murderer. And it's just like, please just go tell the Sentinels what happened. You do not want to be mixed up in this any more than you are. Overall, the story that we were introduced to was really good. I was disappointed again that the missions I had to play several times through to be able to get the full story behind the missions, and most of the time it was restarting on the first mission rather than being tossed into one of the other ones. I would have loved to have solo mode actually working just for the mission part. I did try the solo mode, it crashed the game. I'm assuming it's not fully functional during the build that we got to play, and I'm hoping that it will be in the next... not the next demo, but by the time the game is live, because I do want to play the missions solo. I don't mind free open world being shared with other people, and I love the strongholds not being soloable, especially since I was thrown in there once with one other person. That was not fun. I'm going to tell you now that they're not doable with 2 people. They're also not doable with 3 storms if all 3 storms are trying to beat the tank at the same time. It doesn't work. On to the bugs. The one that affected me the most was actually the graphics glitch that I kept getting. I have 2 1080 Ti's with an SLI bridge between them. I had to disable that bridge to get all of the graphics to work properly. I moved it back up to medium graphics after that because I had it on low to try and see if that was the issue. I crashed almost immediately after getting it onto medium. Now with two 1080 Ti's, I should be able to play this game on ultra settings, in theory. I do realize some of the ultra settings are set for the 2080 GTX. I figured I should be able to play it at least on high graphics. Hopefully they have that ironed out, because I have no desire to walk into an area that is pure green again. It is very hard to see what you're doing. I mean, you had the outline of the meshes, but you and everything else in the room was green. I couldn't tell what was going on. After I disabled the SLI, it worked perfectly fine. It was trying to utilize both the graphics cards without having that actually fully enabled yet within the game. The other thing I kept running into was random crashes and an infinite loading screen. The infinite loading screen, I waited for 5 minutes before I just restarted because I didn't feel like waiting there for upwards of 30 minutes like some people were. There's no point in doing that, just restart. The loot doesn't matter, it's a demo. The crash, however, was another story entirely. The one that stuck out to me the most was I was in a group on my Ranger. We had 2 Interceptors and a Colossus in our group. And I crashed first while I was trying to fire things. I knew I was crashing because the game froze entirely. And then I was back on my desktop screen after about 3 minutes. I loaded back in thinking no big deal. I had purposely crashed the game beforehand because I had died during the 2-person stronghold in a place that the other guy couldn't reach me, so I loaded back in then. I wasn't expecting to get back into the stronghold, but I did. And it rezzed my character, so I figured no big deal. I'll load back in. I should be back with the boss again. I was not. I was spawned outside of the room. It made sense to why this was. It's to prevent people from doing what I did with beforehand on the Interceptor, where I just loaded back in to cheat the game to be able to be rezzed. I was not expecting that to happen on my Interceptor when I did that. I just figured it would quit me out of the stronghold. It didn't. I was perfectly fine with that. We managed to get 2 other people during the time I was reloading into the game, so that stronghold did end up going pretty smoothly. This time, however, both myself and an Interceptor crashed. It meant we were down 2 people in the boss room, and one of the people kept dying continually. I think the Interceptor and I were out there for about 10-20 minutes before they finally managed to finish off the boss. We decided just to throw flares at each other the entire time. It wasn't boring, it was amusing, especially when we started figuring out that the flares could stick to us, and if we moved back we would have a hovering flare. That was pretty funny. I hope the crashes are ironed out, but I know as an experienced MMO player, most of the time those crashes are not going to be ironed out. You still have disconnects no matter what in any online game. It is the way that online games work. And I'm just hoping that it doesn't happen again in that boss room, because it is very dull sitting out there by yourself, waiting for them to finish the boss. Was I actually disappointed in the bugs that the game had? No. It was a 6-week-old build. They actually stated that some of the bugs were probably fixed already. Others of the bugs, they needed to have a stress test to do. And the best way to do a stress test is an open demo. Is the demos themselves. You don't know how much support you're going to have on a server until you have hundreds and hundreds of people trying to get into your game all at once to see what happens with the servers in the game during that time. I was expecting this. I understand what it is. I know that there's no quick fixes for this. I am a programmer myself. Sometimes a bug can be hidden in a line of code that you never expected the bug to be even a part of. It happens. Do I expect this to happen on launch day? Meh. It depends. Am I still going to play Anthem if it does happen on launch day? Probably. The game's really fun. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me very much of Mass Effect, and kind of a combination of Mass Effect and Dragon Age, especially when you're playing the Storm. I loved it. I'm still going to play it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I shall see you in the next video.